Hello, welcome to the show. We have a great guest today. I met him about, I'm going to say 5 or 6 weeks ago. Reached out via LinkedIn. And I have to say, I'm a little nervous about today because our guest and we can talk for hours. And even when I find him on the streets of Calgary, even though he's from Edmonton, interesting how that works. We end up talking quite a while about business and opportunities, etc. But there's lots of things that we can potentially cover today. Very interesting topics around mental health, about building a phenomenal business over multiple decades through the good and bad times of the oil and gas energy industry. But without getting into that right away, I wanted to welcome Trevor Muir to the show.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I know we'll have to try and refine this a little bit because we could go on for the entire day here. And it was so cool to meet you. I mean, I immediately had a connection with you, and we just had so many things that we aligned on, and so I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, great. Glad to have you here, and appreciate you saying yes to jumping on. And I know, Trevor, you have been getting more into public speaking, which is fantastic. You're doing some keynotes at conferences. You've also done a few podcasts to date. A few people beat me to it, but in our pregame, we chatted. We'll try to make it a little bit different, focusing on some mental health, but more on the business too, which should be good. And I'm sure, I'll try to get you on this again in 6 months. I'm sure there'll be another story about what you're doing in your career and life, and maybe how we're working together. Who knows how we'll go.
Yeah, that'd be so cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to take it back to start with how your business, Surepoint, started and the idea. But before we get into that, do you mind giving the listeners a bit of a background on who Trevor is?
Yeah, that's it. Then that's an interesting thing to talk about. I've spent most of my life trying to figure that out, to be honest with you, John. And I grew up on a small farming community in small farm in Elmworth, Alberta, and so that's north of Grand Prairie.
Okay.
And small cattle farm, and I tell people I learned a lot of things about life, a lot of really good things from my parents, about respect, about community, being there to help others, about working hard and showing up. And it didn't matter how you felt. The cows had to be fed, and
Sure.
the pigs had to be fed. As I've shared with you before, like, I learned a lot of really important things about life. I learned about work ethic, working hard, about a sense of community, about about responsibility. And so a whole bunch of really important life skills. But what I hadn't learned about was really my emotions. I didn't learn about how to deal with my feelings. I didn't know how to identify them. And later in life, that ended up, becoming a problem for me. So anyway, grew up.
Which is farm life, right? It's like, get her done. There's stuff that needs to be happening every day. There's 500 things, get them all done. Keep going.
Right.
Don't cry about it.
And I say to people, my dad's favorite thing to say to me was, "Stop your crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." And I use that. I don't say that in judgment to him, because I use that same parenting technique with my son. And it meant, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to come and boot you in the ass. And even as a kid, I was like, okay, well, I get it. When you do that, I will continue to cry, but now I'll have 2 reasons to cry. It doesn't negate the other. One is because my sister hurt my feelings, and maybe you don't understand that, or it doesn't make sense to you. I don't enjoy crying, but I laugh about it now, and I bug my dad about it a bit. But when I moved out of the house, and I got into a trade early on at 18 years old. I got into instrumentation and became an instrument mechanic, and my life was going really well. And in 2003, I got the opportunity to join Surepoint with a bunch of people that I knew and friends of mine. And we were all from the same community. We were all from the Grand Prairie area. Most of us were farm kids. Yeah. And we came together to actually support one another, and with the belief that, someday we could grow this little business into something bigger. And we really believed that. I remember our first strategic planning session. It was with lots of beers and quads out in the bush, and we had a fire, and we were sitting around.
Love it.
And we were like, the first year I think we did about $4 million, and we had about 15 people or so, 20 people maybe, and so we were like, we could imagine one day we could have 40 or 50 people. Can you ever imagine if we grew to that size? And so we just took the revenue and we just doubled it. And we're like, well, let's just make 8 million next year. And we actually did that for a few years. And our growth was exponential. We doubled every year for 5 years. We went
Wow.
for
Okay, so before we get into that, because there's juicy stuff here for sure, based off of some of our pre-talks. So just to back up a little bit, so farm boy, you've got some friends or acquaintances that you grew up with. I think that's a great upbringing. Making sure that you're being productive and adding to society. And so you get a instrument tech degree. And then I'm just looking at your LinkedIn profile, assuming this is right. So you start off with coil tech, and then you move over to matrix measurement and controls. And then, so it must be during that time you're working in industry for a couple of years, maybe up to 5 years. And what was the decision or opportunity, or what was that one thing where you're chatting with these other buddies of yours, and you're saying, okay, we're going to go start Surepoint? So was it we can do stuff better, or I hate my boss, or something else?
No, I had actually started my own company called Matrix Measurement, and I was working for Call Tech Ignition as a manager, and I was still out in the field all the time. I was a working manager. I was out as a technician, and I actually started my own company. We had a client who was also somebody that I knew from the community, and he had came to me one day and asked if I would come in and cover a shift for 10 weeks at a gas plant and do maintenance for 10 weeks. And I said, yeah, will you let me start my own business? Can I contract direct? And he said, I don't care, but I can only promise you 10 weeks. And I got so excited about that, John. I was like, oh my God, I actually gave notice at my job the next morning. And then I went home and told my wife that, oh, by the way, I gave notice at my job because I'm starting my own business. And I was excited. And she's like not getting it at all. And I said, she said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I have 10 weeks worth of work. I'm like, and she's like, you only have 10 weeks. And everybody in my family's like, you only have 10 weeks. I'm like, to me, I was like, that's a 10-week guarantee. I can find more work in 10 weeks. I remember saying to her, I will never get a better opportunity than this. Like, this is the best thing.
10-week runway.
And so I ended up being there for 5 years. But during that period of time, so I was out there for a couple years. I'd hired a guy. Surepoint had started before me. A guy named Cordell had actually started the company, and they had 7 or 8 people working in it. And I knew them, so I'd subcontract them sometimes through Matrix to come out and do work. And Cordell had came to me one time and asked me if I would come and join Surepoint. He was the only owner, and he had this concept of bringing 10 of us together, 10% each, with the intention of seeing if it would work. Could we grow something? And really, it was about supporting one another. Like, how do you, as a small business owner, how do you have a life? How do you take vacation and do this stuff? And we wanted to create a company that everybody just went to work and had fun. And we actually did. I mean, in 2003, when we came together, 15 of us, 10 owners, 10% each, a recipe for disaster in so many ways. And a lot of our council told us that it was a bad idea, but we went for it. And I talked about this earlier, and I said, the what if factor is important. What if it works? What if we could pull this off? What if it could be amazing? And so we did this, and we started on a journey, that became incredible. Lots of ups and downs, but incredible. And from 2003 to 2008.
Yeah, and that
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to jump in there like that. I know you said that or let me know about that 10% each before, but it didn't really stick in my head. I've thought about partners, and I've chatted with people, business owners that have had 1, 2, 3 partners. And usually, like, there's certain setups where you have 33% each or 50% each, and it can work. Generally, I'd say the cards lie on it doesn't work, because the challenges of everyone, like if everyone's has different opinions, it's kind of at a bust. I guess not with 3, because you have one that can go either side. But now you've got 10 people with 10% each. It's like now you're running politics, because you have to try to get Joe and Mike on your side to make decisions. But I guess if you've got good chemistry and alignment, I guess it can work. But 10 cooks in the kitchen sounds like, man, that could be a huge challenge.
So it was.
But it worked.
It was. those things are awesome till they aren't. And we learned a lot about each other. It did work. I mean, it had its challenges, but everything has its challenges. I love partners. I love partnerships. I believe that there's challenges in them. But when there's 10 partners and you really, really believe that what you want to do, the direction you want to take the company, or some decision you want to make is right, and 9 other people disagree with you, you have to really consider that maybe you're wrong. Like if it's 2 people, it can be really hard sometimes. But if you have more than 5 and everybody thinks you're wrong, you might not be wrong. This is something else I learned. You actually might not be wrong, but you sure need to consider the fact that maybe you are. With the partnership like that, when you leave the room after you make a decision, you need alignment then. In the room, you can fight, but when you leave the room, there has to be alignment. And we had that, and it was going good. We caught a wave in the industry, especially in Grand Prairie, 2003, but 2005, things started to heat up in that area specifically, and so we started to see exponential growth. And so from 2003 to we grew to about 250 people from 15, and so so the growth was exponential for us. And
wow.
And
so like 15 to 200 over that period of time.
Yeah.
Like what were, when I think about that much growth, usually I know it was a service-based company, and maybe you can help us understand a bit better, myself as well, as on what Surepoint did at that point in time, that era. But going that, like scaling that much, was there a constraint with cash, like cash flow or capex for like trucks for people? Like how did you deal with the financial side of scaling that to 15 to 250?
We actually funded it ourselves, like as the ownership group. And so we were making money. And so we would basically leave the money in the business.
Yeah.
We did a couple small cash calls, but it wasn't anything significant. We had a line of credit that we would dip into a little bit, but we were mostly out of it. We had good profit. Here's the thing: we didn't have a lot of business acumen at that time. I didn't know what capex was. I didn't really worry about working capital. We would have a meeting and we'd be like, "Hey, it's things are getting tight." So it'd just be like, "Okay, we got to go get more work," and we'd just go get more work. Like, it was really driven by that.
Right.
And we used to say, at the end of the day, just go to work. Everything will work out if you just go to work. And so I laugh and joke that we were successful in spite of our best decisions, really. And knowing what we knew after and looking back, and there were some things we could have done things better to make more money, but we did well. And in we got approached to sell the company. We had a couple companies reach out to us to see if we were interested in selling, and we ended up going down a path with a private equity group out of the US. And in 2008, they bought 60%.
60%. Okay. And then at that point in time, so you've been in, I guess, 6 years, or sorry, 5.
Yeah, but 5 years.
5 years. 5 years in
5 years. Yep.
Yeah. And so 5 years. And so if you don't mind me asking, how old are you at this point?
I'm 53.
This is like the first big exit.
Yeah, 53.
53 now. So back in
30.
What were you in 2008?
What was I, 36-ish, somewhere in there? 37?
Yeah. How about that? Awesome. So 36, 37 years old, and then big exit, 60%. So majority owner now coming in.
Yeah.
And I am assuming you had some type of, and probably your management had some type of a transition period where you had to stay on for 12 months, 18 months, something like that as well.
We had a 5-year.
5 years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So learned a whole bunch actually along the way about private equity, about selling, exiting. For me, I was 36. I remember when we were doing the sale saying, the only reason I'm doing this is I want to learn more about business. I said, I don't want to sell. If they wanted to buy 100% of Surepoint, I told them I wasn't interested in it. I was speaking for myself.
Oh, okay.
I still believed we had a lot of runway left in the company. And I was like, I'm 36 years old. What am I going to do? You give me a bit more money, I got to do something. And I really loved Surepoint. So I remember saying that to the CEO of the company and saying if you wanted 100% of the company, I would vote against it because I don't want to go and do anything else right now. However, a
Gotcha.
5-year
Okay. So at that point in
non-compete
time
is a
during
long
this,
time.
yeah, that's
And it
my
really
reaction.
doesn't
Was like,
serve
wow, I
anybody,
haven't heard of that before.
and it doesn't really serve anybody well. It's too long. If you're in,
Sure.
you're in, and if you're not,
Yeah.
you're not. And it's actually terrible to not want to be in, but you're kind of forced to be in. And I think that
You're
was
stuck.
I
Yeah.
think that was some of the things that both sides learned along the way here. I mean, it would have been better if there was a couple
Yeah.
of
And
years.
that's come up a lot with,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's come up a lot with owners that I chat with who have exited their business, or even conversations with some of their friends, and they tell me about it, where their friends have exited their business. They've sold to private equity. It can be other avenues to sell your business as well, but they're saying, I had a 2-year lockup, non-compete, and I had to essentially have my butt in a chair in this new entity's office. And most of them say, I think I could do the calculation. It's somewhere around 6 months. Everyone can do about 6 months, and then they're going absolutely crazy. So I can't even think of a 5-year duration. But
well, and for most of us, I think it was we just went to work, right? Like I got up the next day when we sold the company. I wasn't even here. I didn't even sign the papers on it. I was standing up with one of my best friends that same week. He asked me to stand up with him at his wedding in Mexico. And so I had pushed off. I didn't fly down with him the day that the whole group went because we were supposed to sign the paperwork on a Tuesday. And I had to be there by Thursday night to do the rehearsal and Friday to stand up with them. And the deal took a couple extra days. So I signed a power of attorney to our CEO at the time. He could have sold my house. I signed everything to him so that I could go and stand up with my buddy. And so I wasn't even here to celebrate it. And when I got back, my wife and I went to Tony Roma's, and that was our celebration. And she said, and I was very grateful, and I'm extremely grateful for how it positioned Renee and I financially for the sale, but I didn't feel good about it. And I told her that when we were doing it, I said, we're not done. And 200, and this kind of leads to, the future of SharePoint. I said 10 of our lives changed that day in 2008.
Right.
And we woke up the next day, and I was in Mexico, and I went to pull some money out of a bank machine. And all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit, this actually went through yesterday. And my friends made me spend.
The decimal's in the different spot.
It was like, holy crow. Then my buddies all make me buy way, way too many cigars. And so I burned some cash that day. But when I came back home, I said to Renee, it doesn't feel it. We're not done. And so I just went to work. I just went back to work the next day as if, it hadn't changed. And I really had felt like we'd missed an opportunity because we had taken the risk. We worked hard. But there was a whole bunch of people joined us who worked hard as well. And we were the ones that got all of the reward. And I kind of locked that in my brain. I didn't know it, but I had sort of locked that in my head as something that if I ever had an opportunity again, I would do it different. And from 2008 to 2013, and my story a bit, the company continued to grow. It went from 60 million-ish to just over 90 million bucks. And so from 2003 to 2013, from 4 million to 90 plus million, the growth was exponential. And it got to a point where I look back now and the growth outgrew us. Like we did not have the acumen to manage a company that big. Culturally, we were disintegrating, and it was not a very fun place to work. We were growing the top line, but we were losing money, and it just wasn't very fun. And I ended up.
Just before you go there, before you give notice, but like, is there a root cause there? And maybe give me a little bit, I didn't ask this before, but a bit more information on how things were operating during this period of time. So you have these private equity that come in, they're taking 60% of the business. Are they driving the business day to day, or is it still you and your team that's driving it? And they're more of a financial partner?
Yeah, it was us. They sent somebody in for about a year to work with us and really to help us build out some different data sets, like get so that we had a P&L that came out regularly and scorecards and the things, cash flow forecasts and things like that. But one of the things that happened is we got burdened with a lot of debt, which we had never had. And so it was leveraged buyout,
Right.
which didn't know much about. And so the debt actually in 2008, the oil and gas industry tanked 5 months after they bought us. So all of a sudden, we have a tremendous amount of debt. We're adding more people to the organization because we're trying to build out a structure to support a growing organization. And so we took on more cost. And all of a sudden, we're starting to go behind financially, and culturally we were disintegrating. It was not a fun place to work. The people didn't feel like we cared, and I don't think that anybody truly knew the impact of giving folks like us a bit of money. A lot of my friends wanted to go buy a quarter of land and cows, like really. And
Sure.
and
Okay.
and for us it was a significant sum. To a private equity group or some folks that deal in numbers much larger, not so much. And it wasn't enough for me to retire. And that's what I looked at. It wasn't enough for me to retire at 36 if I wanted to live the way that I live. But it definitely gave us some security. So we continued to work, and in it was not fun at all. And there was a lot of angst amongst the team, and it was at a time when I was just like, I don't believe in it anymore. And I had given notice actually in end of 2012, early 2013.
2012, okay.
And I gave notice to our CEO and COO at the time. And I gave about 3 months notice, and they had asked me not to say anything till kind of the final 4 weeks. And the reason for that was mostly because I was a cheerleader for the organization and sort of a cultural ambassador in the organization. And so I said, fair enough. So we had a branch in Australia, and I flew over to Australia, and I got a call from one of the board members when I was there. And they said, things aren't going super great in Surepoint, and we think we need to make a change to the leadership. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. We're going in a direction that's not good. And they said, and we would like you to take the CEO role. And I said, no. I said, there's no way. For one thing, it's not very much fun here. And I'm done in 4 or 5 weeks. I gave notice, and they didn't know that.
I made
so
decision.
I flew home.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, we didn't know that. And will you reconsider? And I said, no, I've got another plan. Like, my non-compete was actually up. And I was like, I'm going to go do something else. And so I was starting a different business that was not competitive at all. And I fly home and tell my wife, they offered me the CEO role. And she said, don't take it. Don't you dare take it. I know what will happen. Like, you don't need to do this. And I said, I already turned it down. And I jokingly tell people that the reason I ended up taking it was because she told me not to. But that's not entirely true.
But there is something there, right? Which is, and I think you've reflected on this as well, based off our other conversations or prior conversations, which is going back home to your partner, your wife, or your partner in life, and even if you have older kids, is getting their perspective on how things are going, right? And that's exactly it. It's a good data point, I think, right? When you came back, Renee's like, oh my goodness, like that sounds interesting opportunity, but you've been a pain in the ass, or like depressed, or like, this is not a good move. It's a good data point, whether you might agree or not, but it's good to listen and hear that, because they're probably talking a truth.
So she was, and looking back, a lot of it was 2 years prior to that date, my life had unraveled, and so we sold Surepoint, and in 2011, my life was way different, and I was in a really, really bad state. And this was a time in my life where I had everything that I believed everybody wanted and needed to be happy. It had a successful company that I'd co-founded. I had good partners. I'm close to my parents. I have a beautiful wife. I have a son. I had a fancy acreage and had horses and the big shop. And I even finally went and broke down and bought a sports car, because I thought that's the thing. Everybody's happy as a sports car.
Check the box.
Yeah, and
I have to ask, what'd you get for the sports car?
I got an Audi S5. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Nice.
And here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing. I don't even like cars. Like, I'm not a car guy. I'm like, and my buddies are, I'm like, I'm just not feeling great. It's like, oh, of course you're not. Yeah, you haven't spent any of your money. Go buy a car.
You have a car yet.
So I'm like, hey, this car, I drove this Audi S5 for 15 minutes and was like, it sounds awesome. And so I bought it and parked it in the garage. And I was just searching, John. I was searching so hard for purpose
Yeah.
and so hard for happiness
Yeah.
and peace and contentment. And I didn't even know what I was searching for. I just knew that things were not good. And about 3 years after the sale, I ended up, my wife and I are separated. I'm living in a fancy
Right.
condo downtown Edmonton. My son and I are not talking very much. I'm pretty much isolating and avoiding any of my friends. I was hanging out with some people, but my long-term friends, I was not interacting with. Things weren't good at Surepoint. I was really in a place where I know that there was a lot of frustration with my inconsistency and some of the things I was doing. But I would literally,
Right.
so I'm living in this condo, and I'd get up, I'd go to work, and I'd run into people, and I'd have lunch with people, and
Right.
they'd ask me how, what's going on. I'm like, oh, actually, my wife and I are separated. My son's not talking to me. I might end up getting pushed out of Surepoint, or I might quit. But it's all for the best anyway. Things work out, and she's kind of a nag, and my son's 18. He'll come around, and I would say that, and I would be very transparent about what I was dealing with, but I wouldn't be honest about how I was feeling. And when I got into that condo at night, I would lock the door. It has security coming in. I would lock the door in the apartment, and I
Yeah.
would go into my bedroom, and I would lock the door of the bedroom, and I would often spend like every hour there in the fetal position in bed. And then in the morning I would get
Yeah.
up and go
Brutal.
out and face the world again and tell everybody how good it was. Until one day I
Yeah.
woke up on the bathroom floor, with an almost overwhelming desire to end my life. And and
Yeah.
I
Brutal.
it would have been the biggest shock to most people that knew me, but I and if
Because you're putting this face on, right? Is like you're telling them what's going on, but at the same point, you're kind of brushing it off. So people go, oh, okay, well, things are shitty right now, but Trev's awesome. He's made of iron. He's getting through it. Whatever.
exactly. I
Yeah.
believed that's what I needed to do, was show this positive, I'm strong, can get through anything, sort of resilient
Yeah.
nature and personality. And the truth is, I was dying inside. And so I got up, I was starting to cry. I was on the bathroom floor, and this was 15 years ago almost now. And I
Yeah.
was in that place for 10 weeks. And I can tell you the specs and the tile on that floor today. I can tell you every detail. I can tell you how it
The
smelled. I
grooves.
can I can tell you I could draw that entire bathroom with every detail in it that many years later. I got up off the
Yeah.
floor, and I,
Crazy.
I was starting to cry, and I'd made a commitment to myself when I was 21 that I was never going to have a breakdown again. A girl broke my heart, and I ended up having a breakdown on a bathroom floor, ironically. And I got up and I looked in the mirror, washed my face, and I remember, and now I know the power of intention. I didn't then. I said, I will never allow anybody to make me feel this way again. And I hardly cried from 21 to 39 at all. And no matter what
Right.
had
Right.
happened. And so here I am, looking in the mirror, washing my face, and my eyes caught my eyes for the first time probably in my life. And I thought, oh my God, what would I tell a friend if they told me they have all the stuff, the acreage, the money, the business, the family, but this is how they feel? I would say, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And
Yeah.
both are real, and go get some help.
Yeah.
And so I Googled some help. I grabbed the phone, Googled. I found this lady online, random, sent, and the reason I picked her is because she said life coach and not psychiatrist, because I was not going to go to a psychiatrist because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. And that's how crazy I was. Here I am
Right.
contemplating
Yeah.
killing myself.
But this is all happening. It's at night, downtown Edmonton apartment. You've been doing this for, several weeks. And then it's this one night, and you're doing flashbacks to when you were 21, saying like, you're never going to, just put yourself through this again. And then you're going, okay, I need some help. You are Googling or whatever it was, searching for someone to reach out to, probably because that same, I don't know, like stereotype. I need to be strong. Society wants me to be strong and not be vulnerable. So you're going, okay, maybe like, what's the next best thing? Okay, life coach. Okay, that seems a little bit more tame, maybe. But anyways, it's great that you're taking that route versus the alternative route. Let's not go down that dark route. But so you find this this lady, and you're messaging her in like real time, or
Yeah, I sent
take
I
us there.
sent her an email, and she got back to me in about 30 minutes, and she had a cancellation for
Okay.
the next day. which is, divine intervention, because it's just like if you try to get into somebody, you're weeks even today. And so I went and saw her the next day. And of course
Right.
I'm showered, I'm looking good. I'm putting the mask on again. I sit down and she asks me how I'm
Nothing's
doing. And I
wrong.
tell her, good. My wife and I are separated. My kid and I aren't talking. I might get fired from Surepoint. But other than that, everything's great. And I just want you to help me kind of fine tune some things and help me, with my life a little. And she recognized I wasn't good, and back and forth a lot. And finally she says to me, you're not good. You're not okay. And I'm worried about you. And then she says something that I didn't expect. She said, I'm so worried about you and I can't help you. Do not leave this office. Please do not leave this office. She said, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Do not leave the office. And so I said, okay. And she goes, and she comes back with this guy, and he comes out and he puts his hand out, and his name is Dr. Gons. And he says, hi, Trevor, I'm Dr. Gons. Nice to meet you. And I shake his hand, and he says, I hear you're struggling with some things. I'm like, Anne's got me freaked out, but I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. And he goes, no, you probably
You're
are.
still saying you're fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I go
Yeah.
into another room and I talked to him for about 10 minutes, and I left there feeling better. And I started to see him for a few times a week for months. And I'm going and seeing him, and this man helped save my life. I'm going to see him, and one day I sit down in the office, start our session. He says this to me. He says nothing but this. He says, Trevor, how are you feeling? And I blurted this out. I said, how am I feeling? I said, Dr. Gons, I've been insecure and felt inferior my entire life. I said, I'm afraid of everything. I've been afraid of everything my whole life. I'm afraid of success and afraid of failure. I said, I've been sad a lot, and worse than that, I'm numb. And I said, I am lonely when I'm all alone. I'm lonelier when I'm with my friends, and I'm loneliest when I'm with my family. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. And I blurted that out, John. I did not mean to say it. It's like when you say that thing to your wife and you wish you hadn't. And I'm thinking, here's this
Yeah.
guy
It's like,
that I
where'd that come from?
respect and look
Yeah.
up to, this super professional. I don't want him to know this. And I thought he was going to say, you need to be more grateful. You need to be more positive. You need to change your perspective. You need to look at all you have. Instead, this
Right.
man looks me in the eye and he says, oh man, I get it. He says,
Right.
thank you for being vulnerable and honest with me. He later said to me, I wouldn't have believed you if you'd have told me anything different. But I don't
Sure. Right.
remember anything about that session I left that session feeling better. And I can tell you that conversation exactly, but the rest of it I don't remember. But I'll never forget
Right.
that. I left that office feeling different and better than I had maybe in 30 or 40 years, maybe ever. I left feeling
Right.
better.
Right.
And I share this
And
stuff
it
because
was,
nobody ever, I had never heard a human being, and certainly not a man, ever ask me how I was feeling unless I was in the hospital or sick or had a broken bone. Wasn't even
yeah.
a question.
Because
And
usually it's,
yeah,
how are you? How you doing? How you doing, Trevor? How you doing, John? It's not how
I,
you feeling. And it's
I
interesting that one word. And you told me about this like 6 weeks ago.
yeah,
There's probably 8 or 9 things I took away from our conversation, but that was one. And it's interesting if you just do an experiment and try substituting feeling for do. Majority of the time, you get different answers. And you, I don't know whether it's
incredible.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
There's so much power in words. There is so much power
yeah.
in words, which I'm learning more and more about. And we could talk about that for an hour as well. But
Totally.
saying that, and I use it now because he asked me, if he'd asked me how I was doing, to this day, if you ask me how I'm doing, it doesn't matter what's going on in my life. I will respond with good, great, or awesome. That's my,
Totally.
and it is
Same.
just,
Yeah.
it's a trigger. How are you doing, or how are things? I will respond good, great, or awesome. If you ask me how I'm feeling, I will always give you a different answer than that. I just do. And it's not even something I think about. And I do that with a lot of people that I know. And I'll ask them, how are you feeling? And I will
Yeah.
get a different answer. People will answer more honestly. And so I love doing it. Hey, how are you feeling today? And it's like, you'll get a pause often.
And
So the
you need
reason
to be ready for that too. If you're going to ask, how are you feeling? Like, be ready. Once in a while, over the last several weeks, people have asked me that, interestingly enough. And it's like, not that anything's really sideways in life right now, but I'm like, do you really want that answer? Like, do you want to go there, or do you actually want the how you doing answer?
right.
Right.
No,
And then continue on. But
100%. I think that's an important point. Is if you're going to ask that question, you're going to get a different response.
be
Typically, you'll get
genuine.
a different response. And so be ready, because you might
Yeah.
find out that somebody needs some support or needs somebody to listen. And so that experience on the bathroom floor, I tell people it was the darkest moment of my life, but the worst day of my life became the best day of my life. It is the reason I am who I
Yeah.
am today. It was a catalyst for change that transformed everything about my life. It forced me to go and do some work. It forced me to go inside. It forced me to learn about my emotions and identify with them. And it didn't actually make me weaker. It
Yeah.
made me stronger. And so
Yeah.
when I got offered the CEO role and I had turned it down, and my wife was happy I turned it down. The day after we had the conversation, I had the conversation with her about it and said I turned it down. I got a call again from the board, and they asked me
Right.
to reconsider. And so I ended up going home again and saying, "Hey, they've called me again, but don't worry, I turned it down." And she said that's great. But about, I don't know, a few hours later that night, she asked me a question. She said, "Trev, how are you going to feel if you don't do it?" And and this was 2 years after my moment on the bathroom floor. And
Right.
I said to her, how am I going to feel? I said, honestly, that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know how to be a CEO of a company, and especially one that's this big, that's having some troubles. I said, but I said, a lot of people quit really good jobs to come and be a part of SharePoint, and many of them did because I told them we were different and that we were better.
Hmm.
And we were, and now arguably we're maybe worse. And I feel like I'll be running away from my family and friends just because I can. I can sit on the couch for a few years now and not worry. They can't. And I said, and
Right.
I feel like I have a chance to make a difference. Um, and even though I don't know how, I feel like I need to do this. And so I accepted the role. And I didn't have a very good business acumen. I could read a P&L. I was still pulling cable
Right.
on rigs sometimes and fixing things in the
Sure.
daytime. Like, it's where I
Yeah.
was comfortable. And we had grown the division that I'd started that significantly from 0 to 20 million in 2 years, and taken it international. So I had some understanding, but I
Yes, you've
didn't
done
really
it. Yeah.
understand the things that I needed to as a CEO. But I did know this, that when we were really successful, we had an amazing culture and that we cared about each
Right.
other. And that's really
Right.
what I boiled it down to, that we just actually cared.
That
And
foundation.
so and
Yeah.
so I'm trying to figure out, how do we rally the team quickly? How do we get them to know we care? How do we pull everyone back together? Because they're pretty fractured. And uh, in about 10 weeks after I become the
So,
CEO.
I'll pause you there because I know we'll go deeper and there's even more to go. So we'll come back to the after 10 weeks become a CEO. So just to want to summarize quickly. So you put in your notice, you're over in Australia, you get the first call from the private equity partners. Say, hey, Trev, we want you to become CEO. Here's our reasoning. You go, yeah, I'm not into it, but yeah, you should go find a new CEO. Probably a good idea. And then you come home and chat with Renee, wife,
Yeah,
and she's like, yeah, don't do that. That's going to be brutal. Like after the last 2 years, what we've gone through, what you've gone through, you're like, no, I've already said no. And then this is typically what happens. Then you get the ask again, the phone call from PE. And then you have that next conversation with your wife, or at least one of the next conversations. So Renee is a really important part to the storyline because she's the one that's getting you to think broader on not just like the short term or not just Trevor. It's beyond that to look at how will you feel? How will other people be impacted? And left it with you, not saying like do it or don't do it, but really
yeah,
help with that conversation. So that's great. So kind of a champion in your world. So then you think about this for a while, maybe have a beer and you go, okay, I'm going to do it. And if we go back, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, you did make a comment around when you're looking to sell, bring PE money in, that 60% selling of the business. You were interested to stay engaged with SharePoint and take to the next chapter.
yeah,
And you were also looking for the opportunity to get more diversity experience learnings from business, which you had been doing. And like you have shown many times during your journey through your stories is that you're seeking to learn more, right? You've got this ambition, curiosity. So it's sure you've done great. Maybe there was a little bit of luck in the first chapter of starting it with 15 guys and then growing it to the first kind of financial exit. And yeah, there's things to learn on the financial side, but jump in with both feet and roll at it. So you're into the next chapter and ready to learn more.
yeah. And so my intention, and again, like I said, I'm now looking back, I've learned the power of intention. And a lot of the things, luck is intentional. You have to have a plan and you go for it. And then, there has to be a lot of things work out, which is called luck. But I had set an intention. I had said to the CEO of the private equity group that I wanted to learn how to be a businessman. Like that was important to me. And I don't even know why I
Right.
said it. I was like, I'm an instrument guy. And I was like, hey, I really like business. And my journey actually gave me a ton of experience in business. And so I learned a lot. And so I step into
Right.
this role. And when I say I'm over my head, I'm understating that. Like I was so far over my head.
Bottom of the pool.
And I
Yeah.
wasn't even sure what I was supposed to do. And so I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, hey, I knew about people and let's rebuild our culture. And so 10 weeks after I became the CEO, we ended up getting a letter from the bank, a letter for forbearance. And this email comes in and I had no idea what that was. And so this
Right.
was the start of my journey into business. So I open it up. I'm in a meeting with a client. I step out to grab a coffee and I open this and I read it and I don't really understand it at all, other than, to paraphrase, they had froze our line of credit. They had taken a sum of money out, about 400K, pulled it out, froze our line of credit, moved us into what's called a workout group, and said you need to do about a $3 million equity investment, or you need to find a new bank, or when
Right.
we're going to call the loan when the term comes up, which is about 4.5 months. And so I'm like, holy crap, like I don't know how we're going to get through this. Now I'm freaking out and my ego's going, for sure. I'm thinking, I accepted this role. This is going to be the shortest tenure of a CEO ever. I'm going to be known as the guy who bankrupt
Sure.
Surepoint. Like, and I'm really thinking about me and I'm freaking out and I'm in my head and I spend about a week agonizing about this. And the private equity group was, they're like, hey, we'll get through it. And but nobody's stepping up to put $3 million in. Nobody, it
Sure.
seemed it was seemingly impossible to find a new bank that wants to invest in you when the
At
other
that
bank's
point.
firing you because you're in forbearance. And so I learned
Yeah.
about what
And this
forbearance
just to
was.
jump in quickly, this is a very common thread, right? Is like when you need money and you're doing well, it's there. Well, when
Yeah,
you're doing well, you typically don't need a bunch of money, but that's really the time to think strategically and go get,
it
banks to sign you up for some dollars. Because when you really need it, you don't have the numbers to get it.
absolutely, absolutely, and that is so important for anybody listening. Go and set up some facilities and get yourself in a position to have that cushion when you need it. And if you're
Yeah.
in business long enough, you're likely going to need it. At some point, you're going to need it. And it's going to come at a time that you don't expect. And then you're going to go to these folks that love you and treat you good, and they always want to give you money, and they're not going to want to give you money. It's all of a sudden going to be like, well, we think you're awesome, but get out of our office. Come
Yeah,
back when,
go see the loan shark. Once
yeah.
you have better financials, then we'll give you some more money. Yeah, totally.
100%. And so that's a really good
Yeah.
point, actually, and one that I don't speak about often. And so we get put in forbearance. I spend a week agonizing about it. It turned out that we had broken our covenants, and we had for 18 months. Every quarter we broke our covenants. I didn't know
Yeah.
what
Wow.
covenants was. I didn't know what forbearance was. I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. And this company's 92 million bucks, and I knew we had to shrink it. I knew that we didn't have the
Mhm.
capacity to run it there. So the goal was to get it down to about 65 to 70 million dollars. And some of it was easy because we had about 12 million of big projects that were ending. And so, we knew
Right.
that it was going to scale down from there. But I end up calling the bank, and they gave us enough money to make payroll for the week. And I'm laying there and I'm agonizing and I'm not hardly sleeping. And one night on a Tuesday, about a week after we get the letter, I wake up in the middle of the night, and instead of having anxiety, I was inspired. I was like, wait a minute. I woke
Hmm.
up actually kind of excited. I was like, I have been looking for a way to rally the team and to pull us all together quickly. I'd been looking a way to rebuild our culture fast. And I was like, our people, our folks rally around crisis better than any company in the world. I was convinced of that. And there is no bigger crisis than the fact that we may not have a SurePoint in 4.5 months. And I was like, this is exactly what I've been praying for. Like, and I actually coined it the gift of forbearance. I'm like, this is a gift. And I got up and I wrote down, gift of forbearance. And I was like, this is the thing we're going to use to actually help us get through this. And I got into my truck the next day and I spent the next 4 days, 3 days, whatever it was. I went to every branch. And then I went out in the field and I saw our technicians, and I went to the small towns around the shops, and I got together with people for coffee in their towns and told them to bring their spouses. Some of my friends, I went to their houses, and I told them all basically the same thing. I said, Hey, most of you know me. I'm Trev. I'm the new CEO, and I'm way over my head. Like, I'm going to need a ton of help. And then I said, and I know that, and I said, I want to apologize. I know that you feel like we don't care, but we do care. And I'm sorry that we screwed this thing up. We didn't mean to. And I'm going to work hard to prove to you that we care. And then I said, and there's one more thing that I want you all to know. We got a letter for forbearance last week, and I don't understand what it is. I can't explain it well, other than to tell you that things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And we have 4.5 months to do a lot of things right, or there won't be a Surepoint. And I want you all to know this because I want you to be able to make decisions that are best for you and your family. So if you decide to leave, it's 2013, it was busy. I'll totally understand. However, I've decided to stay now. Like I'm running this thing, and I hope that you stay too. I truly hope that you stay. And if you stay, I don't know how. I just know that we will 100% get through this. And on the other side of it, I'm committed to building a better culture than we've ever had. And John, most people, almost everyone stayed. And then I went to our vendors and was told, don't tell your vendors that you're in forbearance. And I'm like, well, we have no money. So we called them in. And I said, we're in forbearance and we're having some trouble and we need your help. And if you help us, we'll get through this. And on the other side, we'll be better partners for sure. And they helped us. And I went to our clients and asked them to quick pay. And many of them helped us. And I learned that if you give people permission to do the right thing, they will always do the right thing. And it was proven over and over and over again. And we were able to get through that time. And so, some people with a lot more financial background, a lot better business acumen who have come through the organization and looked at it were like, there's no way. Like you shouldn't have. And I believe that I had an advantage. I wasn't smart enough to go to university and get an MBA and be programmed on how to do this. I had to just go instinctive and intuition, and I had to trust the team. I knew that from 2 years earlier that when I tried to figure out everything on my own, when I kept everything in here and tried to figure out my life on my own, I ended up on a bathroom floor and almost died. And I'm like, if I try to figure this out on my own, we're dead. I already had proven to myself that that's a really bad strategy. And the minute I reached out for help, I didn't get judged. Nobody laughed at me. Dr. Gons didn't call me an idiot and laugh. He supported me and he gave me tools. And I'm like, I'm going to go to the team and I'm going to tell them the truth. And I believe I never, ever doubted. I actually never doubted that we wouldn't succeed. I still don't. We've faced some significant challenges after that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've had extreme anxiety. I've laid in the fetal position in the basement of my house over the last 10 years, more times than you can even imagine. But I never doubted we'd get through it, ever.
Yeah, and you need that commitment and that vision and making sure that like you really can see where it's going to go. Because there are stormy waters through that. And I've seen some of that in my career, not to the same degree as you, but and that's there was a risk there for sure. And whether you went through an MBA or not, I don't know. I've done one, but I would say having real world experience is worth 10 times what you kind of get as tool sets through an MBA. But going to all of your people, your employees, and saying, we kind of screwed this up. I'm now at the helm, kind of leading the ship, and it's going to get extremely stormy. Like there is a potential, a real good potential that a lot of people leave, and they didn't. So it worked out for you. And then you go over to your vendors, and it's the same thing. Like that is actually something that is talked about, is like, you don't want to tell your vendors all the time what you're specifically going through, because all of a sudden your like 120-day or 90-day payment terms become pay before delivery. Like you're going to prepay for everything, which would cripple you even more. But they stuck around. And actually one question I did have was on the vendor side, were the majority of the vendors that you had, if they looked at the loss of Surepoint's business, did that represent a significant portion of their revenue, or was it 10%, something like that?
So not significant in the fact that somebody was going to do the work, and there's only so many vendors in our space that sell the material. So it would have been displaced. Right. Okay. But I do know for a fact with some of them, the risk to the write down, and I was honest with them, like, we owe you a lot of money. And if you don't help us, you're not getting it.
Accounts receivable.
You need to, just to be honest, if you don't help us, start writing it down, because we're not going to make it. But if you take a
It's
risk
coming.
on us,
Okay. Okay.
we've always
Some
paid.
motivation.
And I would say to them, we have never not paid, and we're SharePoint, and we suck at paying on time, and we still have challenges, that come from working capital and the stuff that happens in business, but we always pay, and
But you'll get it.
the
Yeah.
transparency, and so. Yeah, not
It worked.
everyone supported us, and a lot of times it was like, okay, well, we'll give you this much
Sure.
room, and I just said, look, we understand if you're going to cut us off, your partner, we understand, give us a heads up so that we don't have people showing up, to buy a light bulb and finding out then. And so a lot of conversation and communication with our vendors. Well, I tell people that we had some small vendors that took a big risk on us, and it turned out really, really well for them, like really well. We were
For long
buying our
term. Yeah.
bread
Long
at the
term view.
7-Eleven sometimes. Like we were going to some small ones, and we became significant, like 50-60% of their revenue, and we were not getting good pricing. They were buying stuff for us, and they could afford to carry us a bit longer. And
Yeah.
I'd say it's
So you're
it's
paying
not a
for it, but
great
still, it's still a risk to them.
huge risk. And then
Yeah.
a couple of them ended up selling their businesses because their revenue torqued so much, and we got healthy and paid them. And it kind of
Right.
was shitty for the next buyer that was big, because all of a sudden we went back to vendors where we got way better pricing. So, everything
Right.
works out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah,
But
which is a lesson in there. If you're someone looking to buy a business, look at this kind of scenario where, and I think good buyers of businesses do this, but like, where is that revenue coming from? Has something occurred recently with your customers, or like businesses' customers, that isn't going to repeat itself, or have those
yeah,
customer relationships existed for multiple years? Extremely important. Shoot, there's one other thing there I wanted to swing back to. Oh yes, really important, which was, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we look at the first part of your journey up to 2008, and then we look at the next part of your journey to, I guess, 13ish, when you're now coming in as CEO, you've had a change of mind here, or the way that you think about things, which is, if I don't know something, that's all right. I'm going to go figure out who the experts are that can figure it out for me or help teach me along the way. And it seems like that's what you're doing more of from the day that you step foot as CEO. And
yeah.
is that correct? And yeah,
I I would say, but if you look back sort of through the history, I came up through the trade, so I started off knowing nothing about instrumentation, and I had to rely on
sure.
other people to teach me. And then when I became proficient in it and became a journeyman, it became an obligation of mine to teach the next people how to do it. And so I don't think that it was a big leap. It was just, one was technical, working with my hands. The other was this. But desperation can be an
Right.
extremely great motivator, John. Pain
Sure.
and desperation can help you to take like really significant risks that are healthy. They can also drive you into the ditch and off the edge of the cliff. But had
Yeah.
everything, and I look at this, had SharePoint gone perfect and everything worked out, I would have never become a CEO. I would have never learned about business. I would have learned very little about culture. It was because of the things that happened, because
Went
we made
sideways.
some mistakes along the way, and that's all they were. I look back now, and I don't have any resentment or hard feelings against any of the people who've come through here, and what they did and what we did. We're human
Yeah.
beings, and we're trying to figure
Totally.
some stuff out, and we're trying to have an impact, and we're trying to make a difference in the world and help families, and trying to grow a company and make some money. Like, we're just experiencing life, and because of the decisions and because we ended up where we did, it gave me an opportunity I would have never ever got in my life if this thing would have went
Yeah.
perfectly. And it opened up opportunities for other people that would have never got those opportunities if everything would have went perfectly.
Yeah. I'd agree with you. And I think you're very positive for sure. And having that mindset, assuming everyone does throughout the journey of SharePoint, and maybe they did, but I would say there's probably people that didn't. But that's probably why the outcome was good. Is as there were more positive minded people that stayed involved, that took the opportunity and responsibility, accountability to keep things moving, like yourselves, right? So
The amount of sacrifice that our team has made over the last 20 years, but certainly the last 10, and the amount of support that I've gotten in as a leader in this organization, it touches my heart. There is no way that we would have got through. And 2013 was tough, and then things got worse for us at different
yeah.
times.
Yeah. Take me to
And
that next story where you talk about like going to those key managers and having to ask them to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we get through 2013 and then things are going pretty good. And then 2015 hits, and it was the first time in the history, the first and only time in the history of the energy industry that oil prices went negative. Like if you
Yeah,
wanted to sell a
minus
barrel of oil,
$21.
you had to pay someone to take it. And
Yeah,
if you're on the spot market. And so all of a sudden we come out of forbearance, we found a new bank. We had the support of the private equity group. We found a new bank. We get things going. 2014 stabilize, have a little bit going. 2015 hits, and all of a sudden it's like, bam. And I say the reason we survived so well in 2015 and 2016 is because of the forbearance in 2013. It's we had to do a whole bunch of things right, and at a time when industry was starting to boom again, we had to keep a lid on it. And so we actually went into it
right.
pretty healthy, thankfully, because we came out the other
Watched your
side not
covenants this time.
really and
Yeah.
understand a lot. So when I became the CEO and we got put into forbearance, I was literally I would work through the day on my day stuff. I'd still go help out in the field once in a while. I had P&Ls up. I had banking agreements up. I was online. I would sleep in the office. I'd work all day. My wife would bring me supper at the office. I'd sleep on this little couch in
Wow.
the office because I realized I needed to learn this stuff. I had to learn it. And I'd have a highlighter and a pen in my hand. And I'd be like, and then I would call people. I'd talk to our CFO at the time. I would call financial people that I knew. And I had to learn all that stuff. And so all of a sudden, then it's like, well, we need to
Right.
conserve working capital. We have to look at covenants. And I started to learn about capitalization and different things that can help keep you on side. And so I
Yeah.
learned a lot. So we get through 2015, 2016, 2017. And in 20, I get a call from private equity group saying, Trev, it's been great, but 10 years in the fund, and they were looking to close. We were part of Fund 2, and they think they were moving on to Fund 5 at the time. And they're like, there's two
Sure.
companies left. The other one's got an offer on it. So we can't keep the fund
It's
open.
time.
And I was like, oh, honestly, I was like, thank God. My plan was to leave. I had a really nice exit clause, like really nice. And
Yeah.
I had always said that when they sold, I was going to go and do something else. And so I talked to them. I'm excited. I hang up and I have one of those moments in the middle of the night again. And I'm like, damn it. And
Yeah.
I phone them back the next day and say, hey, don't do a sim on it and don't list it. Don't tell anybody yet. Let me go and talk to the team and see if they want to buy it back. And so I go to about 15. I went to 15 people on the team and said, we have an opportunity to buy Surepoint back if you want to. And all of them said yes. And I said, I will do it one more time with you all, but there's one caveat. You have to be open to us becoming an employee-owned organization. And they all said yes. And so we moved down the road and we end up buying the company back with the help of a private investor here in Edmonton and ATB Capital, which is a small private equity group out of Alberta. So they help us pull
Yes.
this thing together and help us raise enough money to get it over the line and bring Surepoint back home. And so really cool story and a bunch of the people who invested from the team. Some of them took remortgages on their house to put money
Right.
into this thing. And it looks like everything's going to be blue skies. And in 20, things are pretty good. We took on a lot of debt again. We leveraged the business to buy it back. But it's
Yeah.
looking good. And then April of 2020 was poised to be the best month we had ever had in the history of Surepoint. We had a whole
Right.
bunch of work guaranteed. And in March 2020, the wheels came off.
We know
And
what happened. Yeah.
I ended up locked up in quarantine in an apartment in Grand Prairie. You couldn't get tested for COVID quite yet, but they were saying
Right.
if you're sick, stay locked up for 14 days. My mother-in-law had gone in for cancer surgery, lung cancer surgery. One day we got to go and see her go in, and she went through it fine. And I went to a funeral of a friend's mom. That night I went down south. The next day I wake up, I got a runny nose, sore throat. I can't go home because then my wife can't go to the hospital because they'd locked it down. You had to go in with a gown.
Right.
So I drive straight to Grand Prairie. I lock myself up in quarantine and I ended up being 19 days locked up. And it turns
Ugh.
out I'm not that good at company. I understand why my wife gets frustrated with me.
It all makes sense now. Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, I drive myself crazy. But it turned out to be the best thing in many ways because it gave me a lot of time to think. And I joined these virtual forum groups with different from different industries. There's leaders and I was on three of them, and we were all talking about how do you survive this thing. And so a
Right.
few weeks goes by, and I'm on these, and everybody is talking about the same thing: conserve capital, which makes sense. You got to hunker down, save your money, cut costs, cut expenses. And so logically that was the right thing to do. So we're spending a few weeks and we come up with a list. Our expenses primarily are people. And so we made a list of people that we were going to let go, and we sort of agonized on it. We finalized it on a Friday morning. We're going to start letting people go Monday, Tuesday, and Friday night. I called our VP and our one VP and our CFO and said it about 7 o'clock at night. And I said to them both, don't let anyone go next week. And there was a pause and I'm like, look, we don't have enough information to make a good decision right now. We don't know if this is going to last 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. We don't know if half the population is going to die or everyone's going to die. What we do know is that everybody is being told to go home and stay in their houses. That they can't go get new jobs. They can't go to work. They can't go see their parents. They can't go on dates. They can't go out with their spouses. They can't go for beers with their buddies. The kids can't swipe on Tinder. Nothing is normal for anybody. That's what we know. And we also know this, that everybody has some fear, whether they're saying it or not. Either fear of the jab, fear of the virus, fear that their parents are going to die or their kids are going to die or they're going to die or get sick. And even if they have none of those fears, they have financial fears because they can't go to work and what's going to happen to their family. And I said, we have a playbook to go back to. In 2013, when we were screwed, we went to the team and told them the truth and we asked them for help. Monday, we're going to, instead of letting people go, we're going to have a town hall and we're going to tell everybody this. We have made a decision not to let anybody go yet. Our goal is to get as many people through this as possible. And if we all get to the end of the year and we get to Christmas Day and you're in your same house and have bought your kid a Christmas gift, that's a win. If things open up, you might not be able to take anyone to Disneyland, but if you're in your same house and you can buy your kid a present, then we won. And I said, we are going to run this as tight as we can to the edge of the cliff. But if we do have to make cuts, we will let everybody know in a town hall beforehand that they're coming so that we're transparent and so that you know, because it will be no good if we bankrupt the business. And we ran it super tight. I mean, it was a big risk what we did. But over the next few weeks,
jumping quickly because like this costs money. It's a great idea and intent, and it makes sense to me. You've laid it out really well, the thought process. But at the end of the day, you have to keep the business going, because if the business dies, like, it doesn't help anybody. And to go do this, it's going to cost money. So it's not easy. It's not easy. Like, the intent is there, the end goal. So take us farther. How do you do it?
So a lot of risk, and probably hadn't thought it through well enough, to be honest with you. And it was really tied back to, I said, we say we care. We're never going to get a better chance to prove it than right now. And I had said at the time, look, if we do this and it doesn't work out, we probably weren't going to get through it anyway. And I was a believer and am a believer. It doesn't matter how much pain you have right now. If you get through it, what's the future look like? If you survive the event, then you survive the event. Could you have made some more money? Maybe. But if you're still around at the end of it, then that's okay. And so we took a risk, and we go a few weeks and we realize some people are asking to be laid off because they're not making any money. It was a great intention, but most of our people, or the vast majority of them, are technicians, and they get paid hourly when they go to work for a client. And we had expected our revenue to drop by 40%. We kind of estimated it ended up dropping by 60%. And so we couldn't afford to pay people. And then we heard about the Canadian wage subsidy program, and we found out that we qualified for it and kind of had an idea how it worked. And I had mapped out a plan on a napkin I was back home at this time, and I'm in my home office, and I write it on a napkin, like, what if we could guarantee everybody a paycheck? What if we could use this? And you have to do a top up on it. But what if you could guarantee every single person in the company a paycheck? And so I call our CFO and I say to him, what do you think? And I said, what if we paid every first year $2,500 and every journeyman $5,000? And he said, that's great, Trev, but we can't afford it. And I'm like, but what if we can? What if we can't afford it? All I need to know is that you'll support it if we can afford it. Like, model it out. I have modeled it out, and I think we can. And I showed him the napkin, and he says, I'll support it, because there was no way the board was going to support it if he didn't. And so I get a hold of the board and I say, hey, what do you think about this? And I get, it's really nice, Trev, but you can't afford it. And I said, but what if we could? I just need to know you'll support it if we can find a way. And they said yes, which is unique for a board to actually support something like this. And so I go to about 20, I don't know, about 20 of our team, get everybody into a virtual meeting. And I say, hey, how do you all feel about this strategy? We're going to pay everyone. Not only are we keeping everyone, we're going to pay everyone and guarantee them a paycheck. And everybody's going to, be able to buy groceries. And it's the easiest thing in the world to say yes to. Like everybody
Right.
said yes right away. And then I said, but there's one problem. We can't afford it. I said, we just can't afford it the way we're structured. And I said, what I'm
Yeah.
about to ask might be the most meaningful thing that you ever do in your career. And this is a safe place. We're going to talk about this. And if someone can't do it, we all have to be in, or we can't do it, and we'll find another way. We
Right.
will leave here and it'll be fine, and we'll find a different way to get through this. But what I'm about to ask is not going to be fair. Everyone is going to have to sacrifice, some more than others, for us to pull this off. And I said, I made a decision. I'm willing to take a 50% pay cut for the duration of the wage subsidy program, or until things get back up going. And so everybody knew what I made. And so it was like, I said, if you're $1,000 over this or $30,000 over this number, you have to come down to this number. And the significance of that, John, was that we have people in the organization, our leaders at the time, our CFO and our two VPs are in their 30s, and most of our team is in their 30s or younger. And they have
Right.
mortgage payments and kids and wives and SUVs and boats, and they have way too much shit, but they have it. And it's not going away.
They're living
And
to that lifestyle of income. Totally.
they are, and they gave up. So that level ended up giving up 33% of their pay. The rest, our managers, 15 to 20, and the rest of the organization gave up 10% so that we could pull this off. For 7.5 months, we guaranteed everybody a paycheck in the organization. And if you went to work, like if you were out working, you got your hourly rate, you got paid whatever you worked. But the minimum guarantee was that you got $2,500 if
Right.
nothing else, which was the equivalent of CERB. After tax, it was about $100 more. And so that's why we had picked that number. And so for 7.5 months, the team did it. Cam and I did for 9 months. And, it was significant. Giving up 50% of my pay was significant. I tell people, it turns out I don't save 50% of my pay. Turns out I don't save any of it. But
Yeah.
the,
Learn
but
that
I
on week 2. Yeah.
but I recognized this right off the bat,
Mhm.
that me giving up 50% of my pay was not nearly as significant as somebody giving up 10% of theirs. The people who were making, low 20s, 10% of their pay had much more negative impact on their life than me giving up 50% of mine.
Totally.
I was pulling money out of
100%.
savings, but I was living, I had some stuff in the piggy bank. They weren't. And so when I talk
Yeah.
about how Surepoint, I often say that Surepoint has a heartbeat, and sometimes it's stronger than others, and we've made a lot of mistakes. When I do these podcasts, I talk about the stuff that we've done and how well it's worked out, but we made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we've caused stress to some of our folks. But the one thing that I can tell you is that there's a heartbeat. The people were willing
Yeah.
to sacrifice for one another, and
Yeah. And that's part of the culture that you're talking about. Right.
Yeah.
That's a culture that you've built. And sometimes it's tough to describe culture. It comes through the highs and lows. Right. And I'd say really gets tested and probably improved during the lows.
Yeah. And that proved again to me that give people permission to do the right thing, they'll do the right thing. And I love to say, when you're facing a crisis, when you screw up really bad with a client, like the kind of mess up that gets you fired and maybe sued, never ever squander that opportunity to build a better relationship with your client. It and we said that early in this. Let's not squander this opportunity to build a better culture and a better business. And that's exactly the mentality and the mindset that we took into this. And so we're paying everybody, and it's going good. But there's a lot of talk internally and from other organizations about how culture is disintegrating and we can't get together and have beers and pizza and do the things we do. And so I say, well, the guys, you're the best at this. You're the best at building culture. Let's build a better culture. Let's actually have more fun. You guys figure this out. Let's not squander this opportunity to build a better culture. And so one of the things that the team did was this Master Chef cooking class, which I love to brag about. So every Wednesday for 40 or 42 weeks, that you could join a virtual Master Chef cooking class, and it was somebody'd send a recipe on Sunday, and then everybody'd make it Wednesday, and then stay online and have a glass of wine and beer and eat together. And it kind of took about an hour and a half. And they did it for 40 or 42 weeks. And at the end of it, we published the Surepoint Master Chef cookbook and professionally
Yeah.
published it. Then we sold all the copies and we gave the money to Santa YEG in Edmonton that feeds the
Awesome.
homeless. And we went out, 20 of us went out and made soup and sandwiches and handed them out. And the next year, Grand Prairie did something. And then the team launched We Care Days. So we actually rebuilt our company on a foundational core value of caring. And we said, we care. And I was like, I want to go and prove that caring is a competitive advantage in life, in business, and certainly in our industry. And we started talking about caring and feelings, and that was not really popular. But all of a sudden, now we've got this. Oh, can you still hear me? Can you still hear
Yeah,
me?
still there. Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay. And so all of a
caring
sudden
and
now,
yeah, I can
yeah,
still hear you.
I
Yeah,
had a
so good.
reconnecting. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we had an opportunity. We're paying people and people are trying to go and do these awesome things and rebuild the culture. And the team started We Care Days. And what it was each branch got $2,500 and they could go out and they could spend it on anything they wanted. And we said the only caveat was that you had to spend it on random acts of kindness in your community. And the first year that we did it, most of the branches, one of the things they did was go and hand out free coffee, the coffee cards at Tim Hortons drive-thrus. So we throw on We Care shirts and we go into the local community. We stand there handing these cards out. People would cry. People would literally come out and give us hugs and over a free coffee. And our team, it galvanized us. We'd have a pizza party after. And I could tell you stories that would make you weep on how they found people in the community that needed help and needed each other. We still do We Care Days.
Yeah.
And each branch still goes out and does it. And this was all because of the pandemic. We launched our Someday to Today challenge campaign, and we challenged other organizations to get their people to change their Someday to Today and to quit putting things off and to go out and live your life and do stuff that you want to do because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And all of these things happened because of the pandemic. All of them did. And I tell people all the time, the only thing that's an absolute law that applies to every single one of us is this, that every one of us has less life to live than we did 1 second ago. And that applies to a brand new baby that was born 1 second ago, and to you and to me and to somebody 90. And I think that we talked about hope, and I believe that hope is the most important part of any strategy. And I believe that it's one of the greatest characteristics of human beings is that we believe the future is going to be better than today. And I've never met a 30-year-old who said, my life is shitty, but it's going to be worse when I'm 60. Or somebody who's been like 40 and my life is awesome, but I think it's going to be shitty when I'm 55 or 70. It's not how we work. But what I don't understand is why we believe that we have a future. Like, I just don't understand why we believe with so much certainty that we're going to live to 80 or 90 years old. And most of us will. But it's like, why do you put shit off for a decade? I mean, go and do some stuff.
Yeah.
Call your parents. Totally. Spend time with your family.
And I think there's a difference there because what you're talking about is, I think the way I think about it, and please, like, if you don't agree, then tell me you don't agree and give it to me a different way. But I think there's two different aspects here. That's like, don't push off things that are important to you and experiences that you want to have in your life and with your family and with the people that are close to you. Go do those today. And I'm bad at always pushing those off and just trying to grind all the time. But so I appreciate that wake up call from chatting with you ever so often. So go do those things, but it's also not saying like, don't not delay gratification, right? So you don't have to go spend all your money now, like push things out or do things better for your business, for your life today that might give you returns later on. Sure, those might come, but there's two different things there. It's like you can still do delayed gratification, but make sure you're doing things that matter to you in life today, because that's going to push you forward to being better in what you're doing at home, at the office, etc.
100%. And so it's not be irresponsible, and it's not about instant gratification at all, but it is about, if you want to do a trip, then plan the trip, save the money over the next 2 years, put some on your credit card, pay it off over 3 months. If take the half a day to spend with your kid and shut your damn phone off and go to and be present with them at their hockey game, go on the hike, do the dinner with your spouse. So Marty and I, we did our someday to today was to climb Kilimanjaro. Well, that's a big someday today. And I say it doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane or spending 5 or 10 grand on a trip. It can be calling your parents every
Right.
week. It can be having a coffee with your grandma. It can be reaching out to a friend. It can be going on the hike, but it also can be, that trip that I want to do. I'm 53 years old. I'll be damned if I'm going to wait to 65 to do a trip that's really important to me. I might wait till 57 so I can save the money, but I'm not putting everything
Yeah.
off till I'm 65. I'm also not going and blowing every dollar I have today, living in the moment, because there's a good chance I could live to 65. There's a balance, but we lean
And life's going
so
to suck at that
heavily.
point. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah. Then life will suck at that point. But we lean heavily one way in life. We put
Yeah.
things off. And I have a someday to today list. And one of my things is to go fishing with my dad every year as long as he's able. It's 1 or 2 days. I can absolutely afford it. I put it off so many times. I
Sure.
don't. For the last seven years, I just go. I find the time to go for 1 or 2 days, and I just fit it in. There are things that we could do that we say we can't do that we'd like to do someday. And those are the things I'm saying. Don't put it off. It's
It's
I have
important.
never met anybody in their 80s or 90s who said that they wish they would have not experienced some things in life that they experienced, and that they would have worked more, and that, I'm going to die here in the next 4 hours, and I sure wish I had 400,000 more dollars in the bank. Like, that's
Right.
bothering me. It's just not how it works. So I don't
Yeah.
advocate for
Yeah.
irresponsibility at all, but I do advocate
Yeah.
to stop putting shit off that's important to you. The things you want to do, go and start doing them.
Totally agree.
Check the boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great reminder. And if it's not a reminder, it's a great insight for sure. Awesome. Well, that's a crazy journey. I guess before I ask you if there's any key things you wanted to leave listeners with, and we'll leave some contact information, because I know you enjoy chatting with new people, having a coffee, having a phone call, whatever it may be, whether it's helping people specifically navigate business challenges, or if it's challenges with mental health, mind health, how you think about things. You're always leaning forward and into people to help out. But so what's the goal with Surepoint over the next, whatever you want to talk about, 3 years, 5 years? Is there a duration you're going to stay on? I know there's a new CEO, looks like a great guy leading the business
Yeah.
now. So what's the future of you, and if you can talk about it, and Surepoint?
So for me, it's been a great journey, and I love the company. I stepped down as the CEO last year in October, and Jay took the role, and he's the right guy. Good heart, really understands business well, has been in the industry a long time, and I actually brought him here for that reason. And the company got to a size where it was time for me to go and do something else and get out of the way. For Surepoint, the future is going to be bright. These guys are going to lead it to heights that I could have never imagined. And I took a president role, and I primarily responsible for a smaller group in the organization. Got to work with a
Yeah.
smaller team. I get to be a cultural ambassador, and I'm looking forward to the future. And I'm not 100% sure exactly what that looks like right now. But one of the things is, and I told you this, I set a goal to positively impact 240,000 lives by the end of the year, and that's important to me. And so when you said I am available, I am available. If somebody wants to reach out, I believe heavily in mindset, personal development. I also understand that life is really, really hard, and that there's feelings and emotions that come up that I didn't know how to process or deal with. And so I'm always open to chatting about that, or hearing about people's successes, or their struggles in life and in business. If there was anything that I could really say just in life in general, like, make sure that through this whole thing, it doesn't matter how successful you are in business. Like, I hope that my wish for everybody is that they have abundance in their life of all of the things that matter to them, and they deserve it. I know this today, abundance is a birthright, but make you a priority. Like, make you a
Yeah.
priority. If you want to be a better husband, a better wife, a better parent, a better friend, a better kid, a spouse, kid, sibling, whatever it is, a better business person, a better leader, do things that are healthy for you. Put yourself first.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. Yeah.
Take care of yourself, and
Yeah.
and
If you
and you
if
matter,
if
and
you
you
show
matter.
up well and excited and
Yeah,
motivated, it comes
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
My favorite thing to say is, I don't care where you're at. I don't care how much you love yourself more. If you want to do better in every area of
Good.
your life, no matter where you're at, love yourself more. And if you love yourself like to a 9.9, go to a 10, and then go to an 11 and a
Keep
12.
going.
Love yourself more,
Yeah.
and you will change everything about your life and everything about every person who interacts with you.
Yeah. And I love that. And it's a great kind of final insight, outlook, recommendation that you have there. I typically have been asking this question to guests that involve, if I was to buy a billboard for you, what would you put on that billboard? And essentially you've answered that question without me even asking the question, which is great. I also think it's, you can, as a listener, listen to this podcast or maybe a clip, which I'll make just about that, is focus on yourself as well, because it improves many different things. You forget about it after you listen to it. A day go by, 2 days go by. It's like, how do you make sure you're thinking about this on a regular basis? And it comes into process, whether it's daily journaling, and you've chatted about this before, we didn't touch on it today, but daily affirmations, thinking about visualization of what that future is, etc. And just having that process where it's regularly thinking, that makes sure that you don't forget about this. And it's just not like you listen to a podcast or watch a YouTube video and go, oh yeah, that's awesome, I'm going to do it, and a week later it's back to the same old thing. So it's getting some process to make sure you keep thinking about it.
Yeah, it's important, and it's a lot simpler than what I always made it out to be. I tell people, if you want to change your life, start with this. Look in the mirror and say 5 times to yourself every morning, I am enough, I deserve abundance, I love you, and insert your name. If you do that one thing 5 times every morning, your life will change. And I don't care who you are or where you're at in your life will improve. Just starting there. And I say to people, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You've got it's 30 seconds of your life.
Yeah. What's it
and
cost?
if you do it for 31 days in a row, and you call me and you tell me that it didn't work for you, and you sincerely did it for 31 days in a row 5 times, and you saw no improvement in your life, then call me, I'll buy you a coffee. Like
and then you'll say, good, go do it for another 30 days.
Yeah. And I'll say you didn't do it for 30 days in a row. It has to be 30 days in a row. But these things are simple. And I say, what if I'm wrong? Like, it's you're brushing your teeth and you're saying it to yourself, looking yourself in the eyes. And so some of this stuff about, getting rituals and habits and things in the morning to start your day, they're literally, it's 5 minutes or 6 minutes, life changing. So like you said at the beginning of this, we could actually talk for like 7 hours. So
Totally.
I'll quit babbling here, but thank you again.
What I would say is all good. Yeah. Two more quick comments. I would say, if you don't trust what Trevor's saying, if you don't think you agree with how I'm agreeing with Trevor on this, these topics, manifestation is kind of like the basis. That's okay. Go check out Andrew Huberman, his podcast. He has lots of great sessions. Some of them are way too long, but he's a doctor. He gets lots of followers. He has great stuff, and he talks about this stuff too. And so that's one. And then also, I just wanted to call out, I've never met Lorianne Duguay, I believe it's pronounced. Yep. Trevor was on Lorianne's podcast called People Power Solutions. And just want to call it out because you guys had a really good conversation diving deeper into mental health and that period. So if people want to get more understanding and insights from that, I'd say go check out that podcast. So I'll add that to the notes as well as your contact
absolutely.
information. Brilliant.
Yes,
Okay. Well, Trevor, as always, it's been great. I really appreciate it. Great conversation, great insights. And I'll make sure to link you when we release this in several weeks from now.
Please do. And I'll share it as well. And anybody out there, if you want to connect with me, I'm easy to catch up with on LinkedIn. So send me a note and I will always get back to you.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks again, Trevor.
Thanks.